So I have this book that I'll occasionally pick at called Book Wars by John B. Thompson, and it's pretty thick, as you can tell. It's very like academic sounding, so it's not one of those books that you can just get through in one sitting. But in one of the chapters I was reading, it talked about how books made their way onto those front of store tables, and I thought the whole process was so interesting. It's one of those things that everyone aspires to, but no one really knows how it works unless you're on the back end. So luckily for you, your homegirl decided to make a video about exactly that, and this whole video is based on 2 pages in this book. If you get a copy of this book, it's from pages 176 to 178, I believe. So like everything that I'm talking about is coming straight from this book. So if people have opinions to share, feel free to do it. But this is like anyone can buy this book and this information is available. So with that introduction, let's just get right into it. Hi there, my name is Lauren and I am a best-selling author as well as book and publishing strategist and former book launcher. So I have a whole lot of perspectives to share when it comes to anything and everything relating to the book business. And in this video, we're obviously going to be talking about how books make it onto the front tables at Barnes & Noble. Really, this can work for any kind of major retailer, but I'm just using Barnes & Noble as an example because that's like the retailer that all authors debut and seasoned aspire to. So let's just go ahead and talk about that, what that process is like, how it works, important notes and takeaways. So let's go ahead and kick this video off by talking about how that whole process works, how it works getting these books onto the front tables. Now, for a little bit of context, books at the front of these tables at stores are typically reserved for books being published through large presses, commonly known as the Big Five. The Big Five are all of the top 5 publishing houses in the US, even the world, and they all happen to reside in New York City. This includes Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, Hachette, Macmillan, and HarperCollins. And publishers purchase these front of store spaces usually through something called a co-op, which is short for cooperative advertisement. And this is basically where both the bookstores and publishers share the costs of promotions for the authors and their books. And each publisher is going to have their own co-op policy with some of these different retailers, but typically speaking, this is going to be a percentage between 2 to 4% of last year's net sales. So let's just say that you published a book through Simon & Schuster and they decide, you know what, this book has a lot of potential to sell and sell well. I think we need to have some conversations with Barnes & Noble. This would typically be negotiated between your sales representative or account manager and the retailer, in this case, Barnes & Noble. If Simon & Schuster's terms are 4% of your sales last year in 2022, and Barnes & Noble sold about $100,000 worth of your books last year, then that means that they would be entitled to about $4,000 worth of promotional support, if that makes any sense. And assuming I understand that correctly. And the reason that this is the case is because $100,000 worth of sales times 0.04, which is 4%, is going to equate to about $4,000 worth of promotional allowance, I guess. That's basically how a co-op works. Generally speaking, again, I'm not an industry insider. This is just something that I read about in a book that's heavily academic in nature, so I've done my best to kind of translate that into like everyday language. So assuming I understand that right, that's basically how it works. Now, it's worth acknowledging that these types of placements are not totally within your publisher's control because this really is a negotiation as well as financial investment. And financial investments naturally imply that there's going to be risk involved. So this whole thing is very, very calculated in nature. Now, these placements happen in a process that I've condensed down into about 3 steps. Number 1, your publisher's sales representative or your account manager is going to present some titles or a collection of titles to a bunch of different retailers and see who's interested. This is where they will also share expectations for the book, any specific qualities or information about the book, like how big of a deal these books are, how well they're expected to sell, the number of copies that they would like these retailers to buy. And then if a retailer like Barnes & Noble is interested, they're going to tell that sales representative or account manager which titles they want and how many copies of those titles they want. And this is going to be based on a few things. I'm going to list them off, so I'll be looking down and back up and down a lot, so just hang with me. This is going to be based on their own assessment of the book, the sales histories of the author's previous books, if they've written any other books before, the book cover and other various factors like blurbs, reviews, endorsements, etc. And 4, obviously, the negotiated co-op money, or how much money the publisher is willing to contribute to these like promotional placements. And finally, the sales/account manager and Barnes & Noble would then negotiate what kind of in-store promotion would be appropriate and for how long. And that length of time is usually going to be at a few weeks, but hopefully months, but typically about a few weeks just because it's so high risk and so expensive. Placement in the front of store tables, right? Like if you've ever been to a Barnes & Noble or any like independent bookshop or something, you walk in and there's usually a table full of like these like stacks or clusters of books. Sometimes some of them you've heard about, some of them maybe you haven't. That section for 2 weeks at Barnes & Noble is going to be roughly $10,000 for all participating stores, which is crazy. I don't know how many stores it would make to cost $10,000, but I'm just going off of what the book says. 2 weeks, $10,000. The more visibility you have, the more expensive it's going to be, and if you work your way back, it's going to get less and less expensive. A back table section is going to be about $3,500, and an end cap or step ladder is going to be $25,000 per week. God, I could pay off my student loans with that much money. This is going to vary on the type of placement, the type of book, meaning like the kind of material it has, if it's a hardcover, if it's a paperback, if it is a hardcover, literally like the material it uses, the quantity, the number of stores, the number of weeks that it's going to be available in that position, as well as the time of year, like if it's the holiday season, for example. So when I say these placements are not cheap, I mean they're not cheap. It is crucial that these books perform well in order to justify the costs, right? It's very expensive for the publisher. They're shelling out thousands or tens of thousands of dollars per week for like one book, for like one book and or a very small collection of books. And because it's so expensive, they want to monitor this stuff as closely as possible. So luckily for them, publishers monitor the sales of these new books for the first few days and weeks after publication, and they monitor this through daily feed updates. This allows them to keep up in real time with how well or how not so well some of these books are doing. And then if they're not doing well, as you can imagine, they're going to take them off. If they're doing well, they're going to keep them there, at least for a bit longer. And really what I got out of learning about all of this in this book called Book Wars is that no one truly knows how well a book is going to perform. The publishers don't even know how well a book is going to perform. It's all based on potential, right? That is why publishers acquire new titles, right? Until it's physically, literally out there in the world. You just don't know what people are gonna buy and what they're not gonna buy. They want books that are gonna make them money. And in fact, I have a what do I have? I have a video about exactly that called How Publishers Make Their Money. You can check it out right here. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna include a link and maybe a thumbnail up here. I don't know what the heck how I'm gonna edit this thing, but it's gonna be somewhere. You can learn more about what like the details of that are all about, just because again, that's something not really anyone knows about or talks about or knows what that process is like, but luckily your girl does her research, so she knows a thing or two. So this video is just gonna be a little bit shorter, a little bit sweeter, a little digestible nugget of wisdom for you this fine fall day. I just thought it was something so interesting. It's something everyone aspires to, but no one really knows how it works. This kind of stuff makes me feel, it gives me the same feeling as like insurance, where it's like when it comes down to it, you really don't know how it works or how it's gonna happen. It's just so abstract and so far in the ether, you're like, I don't even know how this is gonna work until they tell me what I gotta do. That's kind of what this feels like. But anyway, I hope that was helpful and illuminating, to say the least. It was for me. So if you got something out of this video, consider liking and subscribing. Check out my other videos if you want. I talk about very similar content. I talk about how the New York Times bestseller works, talk about things that you gotta know if you're gonna publish a book, especially for the first time. This stuff is my jam, people. I freak out talking about it in the best way. So feel free to check out other stuff. If you have other ideas for me too, by all means, drop a comment below. Tell your girl what she needs to be looking at. My handle is Lauren Erickson, but the O in my last name is a 0, and I have a blog on Substack called laurenerickson.substack.com, where I also talk about very similar content, so check those out as well if you feel the need. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. I was gonna come up with a cool outro, but I can't, so I'll just say it. Have a good one. See you in the next video.